then I told him, "I can neither confirm nor deny my ownership of a blow up Hey, whoa, wait. I'm glad I caught that. I almost said something super embarrassing. Folks, we're live. It's just me dash V, and I also have with me today, you can't see him, but I promise he's here. We have Andrew.
Man, I was just hoping you'd finish up that story about the Guatemalan child slaves.
That's a story for another day, my friend, and only with
Oh
my
man,
lawyer. Only with my lawyer present.
uh, man. The thing is how you were like exploiting them for like I don't know what was it? Cedar wood, cedar wood.
Hey, you got to build that closet somehow. So, but speaking of interesting topics,
Yeah.
right? You're currently working on a game, right? You're an indie developer, right?
Yes. It's I'm an alleged indie developer.
An
There's
alleged indie
no
developer.
evidence as of yet. Uh, so we're gonna find out
That
soon.
is not true, my friend. I found so Andrew's being a little bit modest. He has a demo that you can download on the interwebs of a game that he's working on right now, right? The game with the clever name.
It's called Esteban's Family Jewels. I think it is very. It's sort of inspired. It's a platformer inspired sort of by those acid trip platformers from the earlier generations of gaming, where you got your classics where you basically just ask yourself what drugs were they on when they made that, and so I really sort of went with sort of the absurdist elements that you find in a lot of early games.
Yeah, I what I kind of liked about it is it has some flavors of did you ever play Montezuma's Revenge?
No, I haven't. One of the things that is strange about me is I'm going into indie games without knowing much about indie games. I was sort of a AAA guy moving into it, and what I'm doing right now is I'm playing through some of the more popular indie games that have come out, uh, and sort of really getting an idea of sort of the more niche elements of the subculture here, because I have a lot of respect for the gaming community, and specifically, I know that I have a lot of respect for this indie game community that loves to go out there and sort of try to find the more artistic elements of game design.
Nice, nice. So this is both a adventure of development as well as an adventure of discovery for you then, right? You're kind of learning this as you go then?
Yeah, yeah, it has transformed my life in a way that's hard to explain. I'm a relatively young guy, and actually a pretty young guy, and so sort of it's kind of strange, sort of to have expectations of what I'm going to do with my life really sort of shifting into that gear, having it sort of pulled out from under me, and then sort of going off and taking a break to sort of chase my dreams.
Well, that's kinda cool. I think that that's a break that folks should consider making from time to time. I think it's too easy nowadays to get kinda stuck in the, quote, "necessary grind," and, there's a lot of beauty, a lot of risk, and a lot of, scary things. It's kind of a jumble of emotions to chase after, your dream. I think a lot of folks streaming and a lot of folks in the indie game community, both, I think, can relate maybe to a bit of what you're going through right now. So, welcome to the party.
Yeah, it is my party, and I can cry if I want to, and I do frequently.
So, speaking of the party, I wanted to let you know that so I downloaded the demo and I was giving it a play, and one of the things that really kind of enhanced the experience for me, and I swear that this is not me trying to like sell wares or whatever, but I used my Xbox One controller to play games, and so far your game it doesn't directly support game pads, but it does actually play very well with a gamepad that's just had a little bit of configuration. So I wanted to throw out there for anybody that might give a listen to this and then give a download of it. uh, the keyboard and mouse controls I tried it with for a little while. I wasn't feeling the love for it, I'll be honest. But when I downloaded this program, it's called Anti-Micro. It's an open source gamepad mapping software. So I plugged in my Xbox One controller. I loaded up Anti-Micro, And with just a few simple key bindings and everything, dude, I was really getting into it. I was getting a lot farther into the game than I was before. If you want, I can share with my mappings and stuff that I had to different things. I can post it actually to the description of this video for folks that are interested. One of the things I really like about PC versus say console gaming is just how flexible you can be with stuff like that with the controls, because the controls can kind of make or break a game. So it's kind of neat. I think that you're starting out on probably the most versatile platform ever, because I've talked to other developers. I won't mention them live on the show, but I've talked to other developers before, and you'd be surprised how many games get delayed because just trying to work on the controls. But on a PC, you download a program like Anti-Micro. It's totally free. You spend a couple minutes, click, 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 and then boom, you've got a completely different control scheme. And then if you decide that that works for you, you can actually build that into the game. But it's nice for you to be able to experiment, see what works, what doesn't work, and iterate without having to like rewrite a whole bunch of code to say if they press left, do this, if they push right, do this.
Yeah,
So
it's controller support's one of the things I've been looking at adding. It's definitely something that I could do given enough time, and it's really one of those elements where it's one of those things that I'm going to do after the game's complete, because
yeah,
I can just sort of add it on top like a coat of paint. Uh,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And in the meantime, folks can
and
download.
that's one of the things like that, and like a mobile port.
Yeah, I think the game would actually. I think it would work well with mobile.
The mobile port is the one thing is that you do have to sort of deal with sort of cycling through abilities,
Yeah.
and that's sort of hard to get onto a small screen. And another thing I was thinking of is sort of, how they do sort of somewhat simplified versions for mobile,
Hmm.
something like an endless runner with sort of like the same assets and somewhat similar stuff. It definitely, I'm thinking about it. I'm leaning towards no on that end of stuff, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to just sort of make a version of the game that's watered down for people. And if I wanted to do a mobile port, I would definitely want to do something that is at least as fleshed out as what I'm putting on other platforms.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I think one of the things that I liked about it, and this is what I meant when I was talking about Montezuma's Revenge. You might want to actually check out that game. So I want to be clear, your game has a lot of elements that really kind of set it apart from Montezuma's Revenge. So anybody that thinks, "Oh, I'm drawing this comparison, it's some kind of knockoff," it's not. It's Esteban's Family Jewels is a completely different game in terms of just the depth and the mechanics and stuff. So the ability to switch back and forth different items kind of at will and have projectiles already sets it apart. I noticed like subtle touches that must have been kind of fun to work out. Like you have parallax scrolling, kind of like the Genesis days. So on the one hand, you've kind of got like these 8-bit graphics, but then you have these elements. You were talking about the artistic touch. You have these elements that typically weren't present in 8-bit games, like backgrounds and foregrounds that scroll independent of each other to kind of add that depth there. So it's kind of cool to see you experimenting and exploring with these concepts and kind of mix mashing the different generations together to what fits kind of your taste. Was that deliberate, or is that just kind of how it's happening?
Parallax was one of those things where when I decided on it, it was I knew it was sort of like a generation up from what was designed for, but basically I looked into it and you could find parallax in some of the more niche games in it. So I was like, you know what, whatever, let's put parallax in there. It's definitely going to sort of up the look of it, because I'm really sort of trying to rely more on the general design rather than the art assets themselves, because I'm not an artist. So
Yeah. So now did
sort of
you
designing smart around the fact that I'm not an artist.
right. So you say not an artist, but you made the art assets for Esteban, the current demo?
Yeah, everything. I pretty much made everything except the sound. The sound effects are sort of remixes of public domain sound effects, and the
Okay.
font's not my own. So I've
So
made the music and sort of. I basically built everything from the ground up. It's all my stuff.
That's pretty cool. So now let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Me personally, like I've my son and I, Crowded Attic, he's on the show sometimes. Folks know him. Neither one of us consider ourselves to be quote unquote artists, and we've downloaded the Unity engine before and kind of played around with with different things. We've got some different game concepts and everything, but we've never really taken anything off the ground because of that whole like we're not artists. Do you have anything to say or any advice for folks who maybe are putting off a project or not working on a project because it needs art and they're quote not artists? Like what would you say to them?
Uh, my suggestion would be one, find what free resources you can have. There's this great website called Open Game Art. I didn't use it because I found it too late and it didn't really mesh with my style. But you can find great tile sets and stuff like that. I was able to use like a couple of the assets in sort of like a prototype that I made, but nothing from there is in my current game. You're probably going to see stuff from there in the future, just because they have some great free resources and textures and all that type of stuff.
Okay, so you'd
Uh,
tell people not to kind of
Go to freesound.org if you need sound effects.
okay.
Yeah, so things like free resources. Don't let it get bogged down. But be smart about what you're doing. Don't try to make a game that's reliant on sort of the art engineer, things like that.
Right. I
So
think that that's
I
really good. I think that that's really good advice.
Yeah, I
Was
don't know
there
exactly how great that advice is because I'm not on the tail end of that, but it's definitely sort of from the practical getting something out the door. It's definitely has been useful to just one learn what you can learn. Right, I can't learn sound effects. Right, there's just a certain that's just a certain thing. It just doesn't work with me. I would love to learn that sometime later, but I need so all my sound effects are just combinations of sound effects off of public domain website. So.
Gotcha. So folks might be hearing, I don't know if it's picking up on the microphone or whatever, but I swear it's not in response to your comments. Folks, if you can hear the pops and explosions and everything that are going on, I think people are just having a fun time outside on the 3rd of July. I live in North Carolina now, which is why anybody that's tuning in now is going, what the hell happened to Dash V's studio? Like, this is not what it looks like. This is Studio 2.0. It's still a work in progress, so I apologize. Things are a bit more spacious and at the same time more of a mess than what you're used to. Usually see like racks of games or whatever. But the explosions that you're hearing and everything are just people shooting off fireworks. They're legal where I live now, so that's like a thing that happens is people shoot off fireworks at 9 at night.
New York
So
just recently legalized fireworks, so that's
yeah, I heard about that. Like the whole 30, some odd years that I lived there, they weren't legal. And now I'm gone and they're like, legalize it. Really, really, come on.
I'm just waiting for that one drug to be legalized. I think you know its name, meth. I can't wait for meth to be legalized.
Gotcha, gotcha.
It's I've been in the shadows too long. I mean, just ready to go.
You'll hear all kinds of
No,
booms and
no, I'm talking
everything.
about weed. It's just
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think
don't do meth alone.
we're gonna raise all kinds of YouTube flags today. So this is intended for mature audiences only. So
Oh, come on. You know it's for immature
oh yeah.
people.
Well, anybody. So I put right in the title that I was working with the developer of Charred, from Charred Games, and I put in the description Esteban's Family Jewels. Like anybody that doesn't pick up on that, come on, that's definitely a Johnson reference.
It
We
is. It
we
is.
know. Was that deliberate?
It was deliberate. All right. So I'm going to give you my quick premise of the game. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's where you're starting off, right? Simple plot to get the story moving along.
Right.
Esteban recently went through a divorce. All right. And as it turns out, His ex-wife was actually Satan, who just married him so he could take his family jewels. And so now he's going on a quest to reclaim his family jewels, and with it his
from
pride.
Satan.
From Satan, who is his ex-wife.
Wow, that's very interesting.
It's great. I drew Satan with a tutu and a blonde wig. It's great.
You know, when I think of Satan, that's exactly how I picture him. Is in a tutu and a blonde wig. And it does
No,
actually
no,
it does
yeah.
strangely arouse me.
And
I
so
can't really explain it. So I could totally see Esteban falling for Satan in such an attire.
man, he's dashing. I'm working on making a whole like
Oh,
family
they got
album. You get
kids
to see the
too?
kids.
That's awesome. So is this so is
Yeah,
there
they're all
gonna
the
be
boss.
so are you thinking that this will be told through the story will be told through text, or do you think that you'll have like maybe one or two
It's a
one or
very sort of like small. It's very sort of uh Bowser takes Peach type story where it's like you just see a little bit at the end of the levels where
wow.
it's
So
so you're sort of gonna pick up on sort of like the world, but it's
yeah,
not really going to be a narrative thing. It's sort of this is what you need to do, go do it. But at the end of the game, you've seen a bunch of
right.
stuff and you've done it.
Interesting. Well, so far, so I've only played.
So it's not really a narrative
That makes
game.
sense. That makes sense, especially because unless you're gonna have like walls of text, right? The story being told through art, right, would be challenging if you don't consider yourself someone that's gonna be just cranking out like all this like cartoon artwork, right? So, but what's really interesting is so I've played
Yeah,
through.
yeah, it was
Go ahead.
all right. It's you're designing around your limitations, and so this game is really interesting because I need to design games around my limitations, which makes it harder, but it's also harder because I have more limitations because I'm not as skilled yet. So it's this sort of recurring cycle of making it more difficult,
Yeah, I think
which
what's interesting though is that doesn't that kind of force you to focus more on the mechanics and the playability?
could you repeat that? There was a little bit of a glitch going on.
That's okay. I was just curious if you found that, not like saying, okay, look, the art and the sound, maybe not going to be my strongest suit. I'm going to give it my best shot and I'm going to really put what I can into it and make it be, some consistent bar of quality. But do you feel like it's kind of encouraged you to make to have a deeper focus on like how does the game play? How does the game feel? What are the mechanics that I want to have in the game? Because those are really what's going to have to sell it at the end of the day if the graphics and the sound are at a certain level, right?
Yeah, it was definitely all about It was definitely all about core experience, where I'm fighting to sort of make a cohesive thing that has a through line of quality. I One of the things is I can't sort of make this huge jump in musical quality now. I can't go to an orchestra, uh,
Right.
a sort of orchestral score because I've been doing chip tunes all this time, right? I've also sort of limited myself at the bar of quality, and I have to really focus in on what's already there and polishing that to where it's a good core experience.
Nice, nice. How long, if you had to guess, and to be clear, I'm not asking for a release date. So anybody, if he gives an answer with like time or whatever, don't take time this was filmed times whatever he says and say this is when it'll be out. But I was just curious in terms of the whole like the mythical mandate concept. Like how much time have you, if you're comfortable with sharing it, how much time have you spent so far to accomplish the demo? And how much would you guess, based on the work on the demo, do you think is still to go before you think it would be quote done?
All right, so it really is. I've worked on it about 2 months. All right, so I spent about a month building the skills needed before I even hopped in on the project, and then I spent about 2 months working out to where I am right now, and the estimates are about 2 months of actual development work until it's out. So that's
So about 6
It's
months
4
total then,
months,
right?
but my guess is sort of 5 months for technical difficulties. It
Right,
would, yeah, it'd
right.
be about 6 months, beginning to end. So you could probably expect it somewhere in the area of September to October. The final release date is, even if it's falling apart, held together with duct tape and staples, I release it anyway, is November. It's November 9th, I believe.
Now we talked about there's a couple different it's interesting that you say that like no matter what it's done. I know that different folks have different opinions on that. And but you and I had a discussion previously but before we went live that I think I can maybe forklift and bring into the live discussion. And basically there's the Nintendo, right? There's the ID software, it's done when it's done. There's the Nintendo, a delayed game is eventually good, right? But a rushed game that's bad is bad forever kind of thing. And then there's this I think if you're a big studio and you have money to spend and you can float for a while, I think and you've got this previous backlog of AAA titles to kind of lean on as your past experience and postmarker for quality. I think it's easier to have that stance of like just we're going to hit this consistent bar of quality or we're not going to release and we'll just burn cash until we get there. I think it's a lot harder when you're an indie though because it's kind of like Rebel Without a Crew by Robert Rodriguez. He was the advice that he was given to indie filmmakers was, every indie filmmaker, every aspiring filmmaker has 15 bad films inside of them. And the quicker that they make them and release them, the quicker they can go on to do the things that they're really meant to do. He's not telling people make bad stuff or the stuff that you've made is bad, but he's just saying like through the process of doing something to completion and then beginning another project and doing that repeatedly, you will learn, you will grow, you'll become refined. And some of that stuff that maybe you really still love and adore that you first made, you'll go back and look at it later and go, wow, I can do so much better than that now just because of what I've learned, what I've experienced. So is that kind of your is that the philosophy that you're kinda going with in the, "I'm gonna finish this, and then I'm gonna move on?"
I sort of have a bar where I need to be able to look at that and to say that was done right. It may not be the best thing that exists, right? It may not be very good for what it is, but it was done right for what it is.
Okay, and what's gonna be your if you know, what is gonna be your criteria for done right?
All right, so my criteria for whether or not something's complete and ready to be done is
Mhm.
one, is there loose ends? Like, is there like a half completed world where you sort of get it? It's shorter than everything else, and you don't really
Okay,
understand why. Is there a missing mechanic that would have fleshed out the game to where it was supposed to be, and you can sort of tell that it's missing?
gotcha.
Uh,
That makes sense.
4, is there missing assets? And then finally is it buggy,
Right.
right? Is it like horribly buggy? Like, so if you meet those 4 things, right, it sort of one of the things I'm very concerned about is sort of getting to the place where I don't care anymore and I sort of become like a digital homicide.
Gotcha, gotcha. Where you're just kinda going through the grind of, like, "I gotta do this because I said I was gonna do this, but my heart's not really into it anymore, so the more I work, the worse it gets." That kinda spiral you're talking about? Trying to avoid that?
Definitely trying to avoid exactly that. It's
Gotcha. Well,
I
I think
definitely want to create good stuff, even if it's not the best stuff.
and I definitely get what you're saying. I totally do. So you're saying, "Look, I wanna finish it, and I wanna have it be a functional game and the mechanics are there, the levels are complete to the level that I want them complete, but maybe I don't do a third pass where I have super uber HD graphics and 5.1 surround sound, right? Like maybe I just settle for the mono sound that
Yeah,
I have and
yeah,
I
it's
settle for
definitely,
the last coat of paint that I put on there, even if some of the paint is maybe chipped a little bit.
yeah. And at the
That
end of the
makes
day,
sense.
if you ask anyone who is successful, you know that behind the scenes everything is duct tape and staples, and it's
Right,
all about the
especially in the
process.
code, right?
It's all about the process of learning how to sort of like is sort of bruises in the back, labels in the front, right? That type
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah. What's interesting is most Atari games, like Atari 2600, most Atari games are the digital equipment equivalent of duct tape and staples, right? The Atari 2600 was originally designed for games like Missile Command and Pong. And there's a really interesting, I can't remember where I read the article. I think it might have been in a Game Informer actually, but they were interviewing the developer for Pitfall, and he was talking very deeply technical actually about all these hacks and tricks that they had to do to make like a swinging vine and to make a guy that could like look like a guy and he could jump and he had arms and legs and all this stuff. He goes, the Atari 2600 was never intended to play a game like Pitfall, but we figured out different cheats on how to do it, and it was just kind of amazing when you realize that, like, nowadays you can download Unity or you can download these different game engines, and you can say, oh, I want a scroller or I wanted this or that. And I'm not saying that the game's built for you. There's still a lot of work that has to go into it, which you already know, but maybe some of the viewers don't. But that said, like, if you want to make a side scroller, there's no hack to making the side scroller. The graphics on the computers can handle it now. Some stuff, like if you've got Unity, you can even compile for different platforms. So you got to do some code for PlayStation versus PC, but you don't have to rewrite the whole darn game. 2600 was literally, you're sitting there, you're in assembler with a box that was made to play Pong, and somehow you've got something that's meant to show a ball and something that's meant to show a paddle, and you need to have a guy jumping over a river swinging on a vine. What and then thus begins the duct tape and the band-aids and the hacking, and you
Mhm.
come up with Pitfall, and it's amazing.
Right?
So
You're welding like a copper plate into the person's leg.
right. No,
It's,
exactly. So
right? It's a pirate. You're a pirate at that point. You lost an arm. Here's a hook. It's
right, right.
you're hiding in the bushes, waiting to steal stuff from people as the ship's going through the shallows.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's like, I mean, that's a much cooler way of describing it, but do is by standing on the shoulders of giants.
Nice. Now, give us a little bit more of what you mean by that. Like, who are some of the giants that you've stood on the shoulders of?
Okay, so let's first talk about Turing, right? The guy who came up with the idea of the Turing machine, where you can put in boxes that either had something in it or didn't have something in it, and it could do mathematical computations, right?
Right,
That's the basis for binary, which is the basis for all computers, right? So let's
right.
talk about that giant. Let's talk about sort of, you can think about sort of the people who made Pong, the people who made these decoding machines in World War II. You can go into all these different things, and I'm basically building on the work of an army of people who've dedicated their lives to problem solving and making problem solving easier. And you just look at that huge number of people that have sort of lived their lives and passed on making things that have made what I'm doing right now possible. And it's absolutely astonishing. And it really sort of brings a level of humility. My grandfather used to work on traffic lights and had to deal with like the computers there, and I was showing him the other day some of the code from stuff, and he's like, this is so different, this is so much, right? It was a lot less numbers, it was a lot more commands, and it just reminded me so much of how I was standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, I think it's easy to kind of forget that now, especially since there are you can things like Unity, right? Like I'm a software developer by trade, and so I've the last 20 some odd 20 almost 30 years, I've been writing code as for a living, various different forms of code, Java, C, C sharp, all these different things. And like you said, like for the most part, all the coding that I've known, I took some classes in assembler, and I took, classes where I had to learn binary and hex and all this other stuff. But just to kind of know it and know that it exists and all that kind of stuff. Like I haven't had to do hex and assembler and everything for an actual living. And so you just kind of take for granted that like programming is just learning another language or learning a specific grammar to speaking English language. But it wasn't always, you're exactly right. It wasn't always that way. I think when I was really kind of shocked was when I downloaded a copy of Unity, and my son and I were working on a game, and I'm trying to teach my son Unity, and very quickly I was like, uh, we're just gonna have to sit through tutorials together. And he's like, well, why? He's like, I thought you said it was C sharp. I go, well, I thought it was C sharp too, but before I can start writing the C sharp, I'm like, I gotta click this thing and drag it here, and I gotta do this, and there's all this stuff that is not like, if they just gave me a text editor and let me start writing code, I would have felt right at home. But that's not quite how Unity. I know that you can do that in parts of Unity, but Unity is meant to be a little bit more accessible, I guess, to people who are more used to like kind of drag and drop. And but for me it was very jarring because it's like I'm used to just I'll write the whole code, and now I've got the spaceship, and I've got it shooting projectiles and all this other stuff. I wasn't expecting like grab this object and give it a velocity and do a this and that. And now if you want the spaceship to do a certain thing, when you hit this button, double click here and put in your snippet of code. I'm like, snippet? Like I kind of thought I had to write the whole thing. So things continue to evolve, and it's kind of amazing to see that you could go from somebody has to literally know all the instructions for the CPU to talk to it to be able to make a game like Pitfall to a let me select this, I drag this, I drop this, I add these things, set these properties, and now write a little bit of code. Boom, I have like kind of the boilerplate for at least the foundation of the game, and now I can go off and write the other code. It's really kind of amazing to see how fast technology is marching forward.
Yeah, it's the subject of game engines is definitely an interesting one because I was originally writing in a C++ framework, SFML, and that's what I made my first three games in. These are games that are pretty much clone games. I don't count them as actual games because they're not original, right? But they were clone games. I made those games. I went through the whole process.
Yeah.
I made them for myself. They're fun. I still have them on a hard drive on a laptop somewhere. Uh, it was a top-down shooter, a sort of like mobile game thing. I can't remember exactly what it was
Oh,
at
nice. You made a
first,
shmup.
right? And I built all that in C sharp in C++, right? And sort of walked through that process.
Hmm.
And there was a couple other projects I made through like tutorials and stuff. And then I got really annoyed with sort of the stuff, and coding was my big skill set, right? That was the one thing that I knew how to do through and through. I knew it was only one language. It was only C++ and the different frameworks that you could get in that. But I
Yeah.
knew it well. I know it well, right? And that was the main skill I was hoping to leverage. And I basically took on an engine that was mostly drag and drop. It was JavaScript based, a language that I don't really know much of. And it was sort of mostly visual programming where you're not really typing the syntax. You're sort of just deciding this variable does this. And so that's the engine I'm building this project in. And to be honest, I'm getting really annoyed and wish I could just sort of go back to sort of writing the lines of code.
Right, right. So what's your formal discipline then? Because you're mentioning Turing and you're talking about
So
like
it
writing the
definitely
code
has
and everything.
limitations. Yeah, so basically what you could do is it's based on events, and basically so when this collides with this happens, and it happens to this variable, and when this happens to this variable, right? It if you actually took everything out, and you could probably I could probably like reconstruct the code from it in C++,
Right.
but it's sort of meant for people who don't know syntax and all that type of stuff.
Well, I think what's really nice about I think it's part of the journey
So
too,
it's
though.
very interesting. I'm definitely not using this engine again because I definitely want to go back to code.
I think it's all part of the journey though, right? Like I mean I think that sometimes you just want to kind of explore a concept. And what's nice is to have a foundation to build on, to have an engine where, okay, I don't have to figure out how to render sprites, right? There is a sprite renderer. I just have to figure out how to use it. And then other times there's things where like, well, it's more than just rendering sprites. I want to, like you said, maybe I have specific artistic or flow or performance needs that I need to meet that a pre-baked engine just isn't going to give me. I want to control the number of frames of animation or how they get displayed or how they get filtered or something. And it's there's a time when you kind of use what's available, and then there's times where you know that what you're doing kind of has to be done in a way, like ID Software, right? Builds their own engines by and large for all the games. Epic for a while you know, built their own engines for their own games and things like that. So, but then there's a certain number of companies who, you know, we're going to use Unity and we're going to build on Unity. Why? Because we don't want to build our own engine. We just want to kind of explore this concept. So I think it's part of the growth, and maybe project by project it
It's
varies.
definitely learning how to use an engine is useful because you can swap it out for another engine whenever you need. And I can or things I'm still going to be learning sort of like the programming language that it uses, but sort of just getting to understand the differences between building something in a language and building something in an engine. A lot of the tools are pretty similar. You're going to see patterns, things are going to be different. And also, there's going to be a lot of tutorials and stuff that you can sort of, walk through with that. So I have like 7 engines downloaded that I could do for different projects, right? And I have a working knowledge with about 3 of them, and I have a and so but I understand what I would use each of these engines for if I wanted to do something. So
Nice, nice. So what in terms of target platforms for Esteban's Family Jewels? Is Esteban's Family Jewels going to be appearing on any consoles in your mind, or is it strictly PC for this first go around?
probably not Esteban Jules, my first game. It's all about walking through the process of building a game, marketing it,
Okay,
releasing that, learning the sort of the interworking. This next game that I'm making is probably also only going to be on PC. That's going to be proud of and have not that I'm not proud of this game, and I don't think that this game's worthwhile. It's but it's definitely sort of along the lines of I don't think it's something that's truly unique right now. I definitely want to sort of make something truly
gotcha,
unique
gotcha.
and something that I'm not something that I'm happy to say that you should buy this. Something I have to say is it's definitely buying this over this thing over here.
Now, I do want to say though, because you mentioned buying this, I do want to mention. Um, so Esteban's Family Jewels, I'll give a link down in the description after the show, where folks can go find it. It's a pay what you want kind of demo right now, and so folks can download the demo, and you can pay nothing. You can pay $1. You can pay $5. I threw out $5 just because, without even having played the game yet, mainly just because I know how hard it is to build something from scratch. I know how hard it is to work on something that's kind of a labor of love and a hope and a dream, and to not, you know, you know, not know where's my next sandwich going to come from, right? I'm
I
not
was
saying that.
genuinely shocked when I saw that, by the way.
Well, for me, one of the things I think is really cool about indie gaming that you don't really get with like a bigger studio is anytime that you spend money on a product, you're investing in something or someone. And one of the things that really kind of stinks about bigger studio games is I can purchase a game from EA or a game from ID Software or whatever. And there was a time that that would go to folks like John Carmack or my brother-in-law who used to work at EA and things like that. Um, but those times are kind of gone. These companies have gotten so big now that you're giving money to the bigger machine, And you can buy every copy of The Sims that comes out and still see them shut down Maxis, right? So it didn't necessarily mean that the money that you were paying toward The Sims was getting invested in continued Sims development, right?
You're
Even though you would,
definitely seeing predatory practices in the AAA industry, and it's one of the saddest things to
yeah,
see. And I really, they don't need my shout out, but shout out to Nintendo for not doing that, right?
yeah, yeah,
They've dodged a lot of stuff where it's. I think they
yeah,
don't release stuff early, and I don't think they've shut. I don't think did they shut. The
yeah,
one thing is
yeah.
that they're very aggressive on copyright, but even that, I sort of looked into it, and apparently there's something with Japanese laws where you have to contest these things, or you're
Yes, no,
at
that's
risk of losing your
absolutely that
trademark.
is absolutely true. And that's a big driver in what and why they do what they do. The other thing too is, as you kind of mentioned,
So
they
I even understand that from Nintendo's perspective.
yeah, yeah. Something that they do that's very, very smart is they try to make sure that their hardware platforms are cash flow positive out of the gate. Whereas Microsoft and Sony are happy with taking a loss on their consoles and making it up in game sales and licensing. Nintendo always tries to almost every generation make sure that they're going to net a profit on the console itself. And what that gives them is that gives them this coffers of money that they can use to, like, hey, if they know that the Metroid community isn't by itself big enough to drive enough sales to justify a Metroid game, that's okay as long as the console brought in enough money for them to develop a AAA Metroid game. They're going to go ahead and do it anyway. Even if the game itself doesn't break even, they don't need the game to do it because the console has done it. So, so you can still kind of support these niche communities, which Metroid is. A lot of people might hate on me for saying this. This will be my
I love the
controversial
Metroid
statement of the show.
community, but there's like all three of them.
Right? No, it's absolutely true, right? Like Metroid
My brother being one of them,
doesn't
so it's like
Metroid doesn't move consoles. I'm sorry. People are gonna hate me for saying it, but Zelda, if you look at the Zelda series, it was true of the previous generation and the one before that. Like, you release a Zelda game on the console, the attach rate of the game is almost equivalent to the number of consoles that have been sold. It's within like 20%. It's pretty darn close, 1 to 1. Um,
yeah. No
yeah.
one's buying Xbox for. You know what? Actually, I can't remember a single of their exclusives other than Halo. To be honest, I don't have no idea what's exclusive on Xbox.
So
It's
it's
just
it's gotten kind of fuzzy. It's gotten kind of fuzzy. I can do let's see, off the top of my head. Um uh we're going to have to count stuff that's also Windows 10 because there's nothing truly exclusive to Xbox anymore. Um
laughs in
but
PC gamer.
yeah, so there was Recore, there was Quantum Break, there was Alan Wake, Ori and the Blind Forest, although rumor is that's coming to the Switch. Cuphead, that's already come to Switch. Um, Esteban's, no, I'm just kidding. There's quite a few out there. The Forza series is probably the most obvious and like hits people's minds. Um, but you're right. So I guess my original point was that with an indie developer, if we go back to that whole, when you spend money, you're making an investment, right? Um, whether you think that you are or not. What I like about indie game studios is when you, like, let's take Inti Creates, right? They made Blaster Master Zero and it sold ridiculously well on the eShop. We got a sequel to Blaster Master Zero, which was awesome because Blaster Master Zero was a really good game. Same deal with, Bleed. Bleed did exceptionally well, and we got a Bleed too. And so what's really cool is that the indie
And
studios
then
are
occasionally you get like a crazy person, like you get a crazy person like Scott Cawthon, and the community gets like what 17 games in the space of 3 days.
I didn't hear about that. What's this?
No, there's like 9 games now over the course of like 3 years. So
Wow.
it's like
Wow.
mad respect to this guy because he's getting sick of the franchise, but he's still pumping it out. And it's like I
Yeah.
would too because it's a cash cow. But it's not even like phoning it in and I want to make money. It's these people care about this, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
make sure I do this well.
Yeah. And
And
so
like that is amazing.
I absolutely agree. So folks, if you're going to check out Esteban's Family Jewels, I encourage you to, whether you want to try before you buy or whether you want to try it first, or you want to put something forward first. Just remember, like, if you support the concept of indie games, and indie game development, if you find that valuable, as a concept and as a platform, really consider contributing, even if it's one of these, pay what you like type of thing. Yes, you could just click through and download. But and I'm not saying that you have to give like $1 million, but I am saying, if you download the demo, you see elements that you like and you'd like to see it be complete, you know, a really clear way to send that message to a developer is to be like, here's $1, here's $5, right? And if a handful of people do that, maybe other avenues may be open depending on the developer's circumstances. It could be maybe they don't need to pay any bills, with your money, but it could be that, I didn't think I could afford an artist to do cutscenes, but then I had all these people like contribute toward the game, and maybe I get some cutscenes, right? Maybe I have somebody do something like that. So and they feel that it's worth it at that point because the project begins to kind of take on a life of its own. So I really love that in the indie community, you can be involved with developers on their Twitter. You can be involved with developers during their development cycle. If you download the demo and you were to reach out to Andrew and say, "Hey, while I was playing the game, I noticed blah 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 blah," and you threw him an idea, Andrew, how open would you be to something like that?
I'm definitely very open to feedback. And another thing that I'm working on that I'm very excited for is like a revenue sharing thing specifically for people who are content creators of their own, where it's they get sort of it basically works where if they contact me or I contact them and they accept, I will generate a coupon code and basically they can give out that coupon code to their audience and anyone who buys there's going to be the cut that's taken
Hmm.
by itch off the top and then the revenue is going to be 50-50 split between me and them after
Nice. So
that.
I checked out Itch, and it's kind of neat. It's almost like an indie version of Steam, right? Tell us a bit about Itch.
Itch is amazing because you actually don't have to do any revenue share. I'm doing a 10% revenue share with them for this project. Mainly, I would like to put it up higher lately, but I can't really like afford that because I'm trying to recoup costs.
Right.
Uh, but you can do it 0 and it doesn't affect the algorithm at all. It doesn't affect promotion on the website. You get to choose how much you share. You can do things like bundles with other creators. It's really great. One of the one thing is that since they're dealing with such a wide variety of files, sometimes they don't work properly with the downloads.
Hmm.
We actually encountered that firsthand earlier today.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
actually
when we
I noticed a little bit of I downloaded it through a browser and I ran it that way, but I did notice that there was a mechanism to do so through the Itch app.
Yeah, so that's one of the that's one of the unfortunate things because they don't have as much money behind them as something like Steam, where
Yeah.
some of the files can slip through, uh, and there can be a little bit of right. It's definitely an indie version of Steam where there's a little bit more of the duct tape and staples,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Well,
you
it's
know
cool
it's
that
still
stuff like that exists though, and I imagine stuff like that is going to
a
be,
very well polished website, and I would recommend. I think it could be the number one place for indie games by the end of the decade.
That's pretty cool.
Definitely.
That's pretty cool. It definitely seemed to show some promise. Like when I saw it, to your point, it definitely looked like it was polished. It definitely looked like they kind of had their their act together in terms of how they want to present and what they're trying to do. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't one of the things that's been kind of I guess a challenge with Steam for me is really just kind of finding content because there's indie content and then there's content that's trying to pass off as indie, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to give any specific examples mainly because I don't want to you know piss on anybody's parade, but
Digital
what
homicide.
right, right. But,
Sorry.
but but I guess what I'm getting at is that I really enjoy playing games that what you're seeing is you're seeing a really small dedicated team of folks that like they're on a wing and a prayer and they're putting everything that they got into this game. And I think that it's a different product than if you get like army of people, right? Salaried employees, right? They can still have passion and they can still work hard and they can still make really great stuff. And we see that all the time. But the only thing I'm kind of caveating about is that I don't like it when a team of folks who do it as their job, like solely as their job, try to pass themselves off as indie doing it for the love of doing it. You know what I mean?
Sort of, you're talking like, sort of, are you talking like you startup on this is how I'm feeding people, or I'm this industry guy who I have all this funding behind me already, and
Kind of neither. I guess what I'm referring to is folks who are like, this is my job. I do it because it gives me benefits and it pays my bills. If I wasn't doing this game, I'd be doing this other game. If I wasn't doing that game, I'd be doing it. Kind of like the whole like you've pieced together a team, and that team is working on a game. They just happen to be working on that game, but they could be working on any game. And the level of focus, the level of
oh
quality,
yeah,
the
yeah,
level
yeah,
of you know what
I
I
got
mean?
a
It's
better idea
I
of that.
guess it's more like a I
The,
don't know. It's hard to describe. Maybe I'm not describing it well, but it's just like
yeah, yeah, I
are
understand
are you
now.
are you a
It's
f- are you a game factory, right?
mhm.
Or are
It's
you a passionate game developer, right? Are you just kind of
like,
churning through
how would you
games
feel if you
to have them?
knew that Picasso imported someone from Germany to finish up his paintings? How would you feel?
Right, right. No, I guess that's you
You
nailed
know,
you
I
nailed
think
it.
that
Yeah, you nailed it.
definitely it goes down to looking at games as an art form.
Right, right. Yes, yes. Yeah, and
So
so I
that's
like being able to see. I'm not saying that those other people can't have passion and drive and all this other stuff, but I really love seeing when somebody's putting stuff on the line for their passion, right? Versus just getting a job done.
it. The thing is, even when you do have the passion, there are days where you are just getting the job done. There's days where I woke up and
Yeah,
I spent like 3 hours fixing one bug that I really didn't care about, but I knew I needed to get it done.
yeah.
Right. But the thing is that goes away eventually because there is that overarching passion for
Right,
the
right.
end
Versus
result
I
is
have to
done.
get this done because the project manager will not leave me alone, will not stop calling me, or I might get fired or whatever. You know what I mean? I think you kind of nailed it. I think the stuff that you could deal with can be similar, but I think the perspective that you have while dealing with it can be different. And I guess that's what I was getting at was that I love seeing games that are made by somebody with the perspective of I want to make a good game, a proper game. I want it to find its audience and things like that. If nothing else, I hope that I learn on this game how to make my next game even better, that kind of thing. I think that's a lot different than just like, let me come in, clock my time, do my thing, hope I pass the review, and then right move on to the next project. What's my next project kind of thing. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with either person. And I'm not saying that bigger studios are all those people. You do have those studios that have
Yeah, I
those
have a
really,
lot of respect for the people who go in and they work on projects that aren't their own, and they try to make something special out of it.
yeah,
Right? People who have
yeah.
a lot of respect for that. Like
I just
mad
don't want
respect for
them passing
bringing
it
it.
off as if they worked on it by themselves in their back room, and then you know what I mean. Just
Yeah.
be honest in the presentation of what you are. I guess, is this a
Uh,
studio game or is this a wing and a prayer type,
one of
game?
the marketing things that I look into marketing a lot, because marketing is like the biggest hurdle for someone who's just starting
Right.
out. And one of the things is you come across so much stuff that's just slimy as crap, where it's well, pretend you like this person's stuff, and I never put up a
Yeah.
front with that. Whenever I'm contacting someone, I'm like, I haven't seen much of your stuff, I liked what I see. And I don't try to pretend to be like a long-term fan, right? And that's the type of stuff they suggest you do, and that's like so
Yeah.
slimy. And uh I was honest with you up front, where it was like, I hope I got it across that I wasn't there for a very long time. I sort of came across, looked at it, and liked this program, and decided to ask to come on.
Yeah. And I really, I really appreciated that.
I
That
thought I communicated that as well as I could. So
Yeah,
it,
absolutely, absolutely. And it's kind of the interesting thing about the show, because we've had some interesting guests in the past. I won't go through all of them because I'm not trying to humble brag or anything, but it gets down to exactly what you're saying, is just be honest. I've never reached out to somebody and said, hey, I got this big show, blah blah blah, and like check out my audience, yada yada, mainly because I can't. Right, I don't have like a massive audience, right? Now, as I've had shows where I've had big industry players more and more often, it's gotten a little bit easier where I could say like, hey, would you like to be on the show? Here's some people we've had in the past, and I can kind of drop a few big names and give like a link. But when you don't have that initially, all you really have is like, hey, look, I'm a mid-30s something, right? I like gaming. My son likes gaming. Um, we kind of have a common history of retro games as well as newer games. And in your case, flattery gets you a lot, but it has to be true flattery, right? Like when I went and I reached out to Tom, I was very, honest with him of that. Sega was always a curiosity to me. I lived in a Nintendo household, but I married a Sega girl. And so now I love as an adult having the best of both worlds. And, since you kind of, when I told Tom, since you kind of shepherded, you know, Sega through the generation that made me wish I was a Sega gamer, even though I was a Nintendo gamer, I'd love to talk to you a bit more about that. And you know, he he came on the show and we had a really great talk about all kinds of stuff. So just be genuine with people. Don't try to be fake. Don't try to be something that you're not. I think sooner or later, even if you're initially successful, I think sooner or later they find out the emperor has no clothes. So it's just
yes,
better to be
and
upfront.
the problem is, especially with that type of fakery, you find out that the emperor has no clothes, and he also has a tiny wee wee. So it's
Wow. Well, I did notice in your game, Esteban's family jewels are huge.
yes, I have huge jewels.
Is that
I'm proud of
deliberate?
my humongous jewels. They're the biggest jewels anyone has ever seen.
Like,
Believe me.
folks, you got to play the game. Like
You get to see my huge jewels. It's
the
fantastic.
jewels, the jewels are like bigger than his face. They're like
And
ridiculously
that's just
huge.
it was really just the size of the sprite, but yeah, and
Yeah.
they are big.
And
And
they're different colors and stuff too, so he might want to get that looked at.
uh he's getting to that age where he needs to go and be checked every couple of years. Get a quality gem inspector to see about grades and stuff, carrots and all that.
Well, so where can folks find you?
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and I also have my own website. If you really want to find more, the best sort of like just I can just say it and you can sort of find it is you can just go to charredgames.com. Simple.
Nice.
I got when I was setting everything up, I was like, I need the .com domain before I do anything else, just because that's just gonna be the easiest way for
Yeah.
people to find me.
Now, where did Charred Games, where'd that name come from? Is there a story?
Okay, so Charred Games was I basically took two random words and added it in front. So it was originally Charred Fish Games,
Oh, wow.
and that was just so awful. I dropped the fish, right?
Right.
So now it's just Charred Games. And so now I have a fake story to tell when anyone asks me this question. I should have led with that. It was like,
Right.
because I've been through the fire and now I'm charred.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Right?
Because most
So,
people do
so
the phoenix, like rise from the ashes, but that's kind of cliche now.
yeah, yeah. It's like, so now I have this great fake story. Huh? I've
That's
been through the
awesome.
fire. Now I'm charred. Right?
I've been burned, my friend.
Hmm.
I've been burned. Well,
So,
and I didn't know if it maybe had something to do with like because I'm noticing a theme emerge here with like fire and burning and Satan and all this stuff. So I'm
uh,
noticing kind of a
if I was to have to connect it to a thematic element, I can make up one on the spot right now. Mainly, I'm a brash person who's willing to go scorched earth on anything.
Well, speaking of scorched, it's about 10 o'clock, so it's probably about time to burn it down. Is there anything else that you want to kind of cover before we call it a night?
I can talk about a couple upcoming game ideas.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
All
What
right.
else? What else you got in mind?
I have like 7 different game ideas that I'd like to make. I'm probably going to make about 3 of them. My favorites, so I'm going to rattle off a couple of my favorites. One I'm definitely doing, it's going to come right after Esteban's Family Jewels, is called DM Apocalypse. It's basically just a girl takes a selfie and her skirt is just 1 millimeter too short, so all the guys come after her, and it's basically a zombie survival game, wave shooter, where you're just a woman trying to survive hordes of guys.
Oh
And
man.
there's this big fat guy with a fedora based on me, just throwing fedoras.
Oh wow.
It's also sort of to balance out sort of like the bitchy ex-wife type thing with this game. So
Okay.
it's a little bit of a balance to that where it's like I don't want to like just beat up on one sort of thing. I'm all about making jokes and having fun. I don't want it to feel like I'm targeting a group of people.
Right. Right.
So just sort of having a well-rounded thing right there. Another one is Me Too. It's going to be an turn-based RPG based around you're a girl with anxiety, and there's no actual combat. It's just social interactions.
Okay.
So, it's you work as one of the areas is you're working a job at a grocery store and you have an overly talkative customer come through and you have to like deal with that and like sort of like turn based, you use how are you doing today? It wasn't very effective. Yeah, things like that.
Right.
So and then finally, it's I don't have a name for it yet, but it's sort of like a modern fantasy thing where it's basically you got all your orcs and your elves, but modern cities, and they're all crime families now. And you're the humans. The humans don't have a crime family, and you're trying to take over the city and sort of displace all these other crime families.
Oh wow. So that one's kind of totally different than the other one. The first couple kind of had like a theme,
Mm.
or I guess like a somewhat consistent theme, of you know women in peril or women causing peril. Um, and then this last one is like totally different though.
Yeah, I definitely Uh, I didn't really see the through line with women. It was more of just I wanted to make interesting characters, and
Right.
I don't like to limit myself. I don't like self insert characters. Esteban
Right.
is not a self insert of me, right? It's he's his own person, right? It's and one of the easiest ways to prevent a self insert is to make them different in some way. So I always try to like change something so it's not like a direct group. And one of the easiest ways to do that is
Right.
obviously making
Right.
your character a woman.
what do they call it? Mary Sue. You don't want to Mary Sue yourself, right?
Or Gary Stew. Gary Stew would be that for me because
Yeah.
I'm a guy, right?
Yeah. So
So
I'd never heard that one before. That's interesting.
yeah, yeah.
So do you think in the future, like in terms of in terms of like a lot of I don't when did you start playing games? When did you start gaming?
Oh man, that's a complicated question because uh, I'm pretty sure my mother accidentally gave me a joystick instead of a bottle to suck on when I was.
Right.
My brother had an original Xbox and a GameCube,
Gotcha,
right?
gotcha. So
So he also had. Uh, I'm 17 if you didn't know, so that should make a bit more
gotcha,
sense,
gotcha.
right?
Yeah, mate,
Is
that makes total sense.
uh, that'll give you a good idea of the time frame, right?
So I think it's still I think my
So
question
so it's I don't know what
go ahead.
Xbox. Four games that really formed me were Donkey Kong 64, uh, Mario Kart 64, Pac-Man World 2, and Crash Bandicoot: The
Gotcha.
Wrath of Cortex.
Gotcha. So I think you still came in, even though I'm 40. Not that it's a contest, but the main reason that I asked when did you start gaming was because you know, up until I think the last decade, right? Um, gaming has been predominantly dominated by male hero figures, right? Male main characters and stuff. Unless you're talking like a fighting game or something where it's like choose your own character and that kind of stuff. But even then, like you look at the games like when I was a kid, Mortal Kombat, right? One female character and then a whole roster of dudes, right? So it wasn't until more recently, and then you have the other extreme where you have like Dead or Alive, where like half the roster is female and half the roster is male, but the females are barely clothed at all, and all the males are like, you know, wearing like snow jackets and snow pants and all that stuff, right? So meanwhile the girls are all fighting in like bikinis and stuff like that in the middle of the Himalayas.
How how,
But
co- how come in a winter province like Skyrim we have these armors that are like missing like the entire top portion with just like a strip of leather in front? It was like who is making all this armor that like perfectly caress the breast? It is
I
me,
know.
Mitty the Titty Smitty.
Right, right. So I guess my question for you was, I think that there's over the last, especially 5 years, there's been this kind of groundswell and this awareness of the desire, and the need for kind of like um, more female leads and heroes. More, we've seen dudes in distress. There was a Super Princess Peach is one game that kind of played that thread. There was another. I don't remember what the other game is. There was another game that was quite similar, but I've actually got one too. The maker of Ghouls and Ghosts or Ghosts and Goblins made a game for his daughter called Battle Princess Madeline, which is a good game. It's basically Ghouls and Ghosts with a female protagonist. So I guess I just want to ask you if you think at some point you might give some thought to as part of the whole as you try to create interesting characters with interesting stories and characters that aren't you, right? Do you think that'll open up some room for, like people of color characters, maybe minority characters, female characters in kind of more lead active roles and stuff like that?
Well,
Is, is
so
is that something that you
so looking at Esteban, right? Esteban's Spanish, right? So it's not uh he's like Spanish Egyptian, right? So sort of
Mhm.
on that type of thing, very sort of modeled after my grandmother who fled from Egypt, right? So
Interesting,
so
interesting.
so that was that was sort of like what I was modeling it after, sort of like this sort of Spanish heritage that moved into Egypt and sort of picked up. That was really what I was going when I was sort of like sort of designing his skin color, because you need a skin color for character, else his skin's going to be invisible,
Right,
right?
right.
So that's sort of what I modeled the skin color after, right? Because I just think my grandmother's such a lovely, and I really, thought it would be nice to do that.
That's
So,
kind of cool. So so in a
so
way,
he
Esteban
isn't
and his
really.
character, while not you, he's kind of like an homage to your heritage. Then you would say,
Yes. I'm not. I'm completely white. I'm as white as a snowball. My grandmother is adoptive, right? It's adoptive grandmother. So the story there is really interesting.
okay,
But yeah, I'm definitely a pure puddle of white. So, but
I can't.
it's
Same here. The
so.
only color is when I change my lights. So
Uh, Creating interesting characters is what's important to me, and I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice by not representing everyone when it's appropriate. I don't like artificial representation. I don't. I think you
right.
you hurt yourself that way. And I don't, and not in an oh, I don't want my Thor to be replaced with Thorella type way, but it's a, well, what good's Thorella gonna be if it's just a male character with breasts?
No, I
What
gotcha.
what is what does that do for people? It does nothing.
It's back to being genuine. You're saying if the story
And
idea
so I
comes to
really
you,
care more about sort of building up characters from the ground up.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
And
So you kind of just want the story to drive the community.
I want more characters and more diverse characters. I don't want the same number of characters just with mixed up uh, physical traits.
Makes
Because I
sense. Makes
because
sense.
it's back to the old adage, more voices is is better than sort of less voices, and
Gotcha.
also another thing is I don't want to shut the door behind anyone on me. So it's one of the things I'm thinking about is I'm going to have to draw from my own experiences. At some level, every game's going to be a piece of me.
Right, right. It won't be
So
you, but it'll be a piece.
so I
Yes.
am limited in certain ways when I'm writing people who are different from me than when I'm writing people who are the same as me. Right? I can't really sort of dive into it outside of the common humanity level that I have with a little bit of what it means to be a woman when you're writing a woman character, but not nearly as deep because I just haven't lived that experience.
Right, right.
And
Well, I
you
think what's really
really,
neat though is right as because it's a journey of progress and growth. I think what's really cool is that there'll be there may work on this game, work on the next game, work on the next game. Opportunities may open up and may present themselves. I think then the main thing is you kind of mentioned, hey, look, I'm open to what the journey of development and discovery will bring. I'm not going to artificially slam a door on something, but I'm not going to try to force it if it's not something that I can do to if it's not something that I can do in a real way. Like if there's a real way that I can do it and do it proper, I will do it. So that's kind of cool. I think that's about the best that you can hope for.
yeah, and I would love to see more people get into sort of hobbyist game development where they're not really trying to sort of create a product, where they're sort of more creating something for themselves, and that maybe they put it up on like a message board or something, and
Yeah.
and they get to tell their own stories. I really think it's one of those things where games take such an insane amount of work. They require every type of art, but they only require you to be good at one of them to really sort of you know base that around the one type of thing you can do. You can really do that. Obviously it helps if you're amazing at all of them, but you can really sort of lean on one for the others, and sort of, especially when you're in the hobbyist realm of stuff.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for the time, and thank you for giving us a sneak peek listen at some of the upcoming projects that you have in mind, folks. I encourage you to go check out charredgames.com. I'm also going to put some links to various other things down in the doodly doo. I put links to his Twitter. I'll put a link to Esteban's Family Jewels. Um, don't maybe they can Google that. I don't know what actually will happen if you Google that. Google it with
I
the
show up like 5th result on Google.
you make sure to have safe search enabled.
Oh man, you're gonna see some like Spanish bathhouse stuff that you do not want.
Hey, well, there's gamer girls selling gamer girl bathwater now. So
Oh man,
did you
yeah,
see
I
that?
saw that.
That's a thing.
Oh, you know what? If you can give me like 2 minutes to talk about that.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. What are your
So
thoughts on gamer girl
as
bathwater? I'll
someone
give you
who
5 minutes for that.
who's someone who's an avid memer, right? I used to make memes before I made games. All
Yep.
right. This person is someone who is known well. She is Belle Delphine. She's sort of this
Yep.
type of chaotic good Twitch thought. All right, would
Yeah.
be the proper term for her, right? Where you can buy her. You can buy her nude stuff online, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
and all that type of thing, right? And she has a great sense of humor about everything, and so there is sort of this irony to it, where it's sort of risen out of sort of like the gamers eat bees meme, right? Combined with sort of there's like this huge subculture there with the gamers need to go to war against the furries, and we need gamer girls on our side, and we need that sweet gamer girl juice, and there's like all this
Right.
weird stuff connected to it. So it is definitely like this super meta joke that, and so in the comment section you'll see half people, like a majority of the people who are in on the joke, and then like 10% weirdos who actually like the stuff.
I wonder how many people have actually tried to buy it though.
I have a Pornhub account lately, and it was all joke stuff. Like she strokes massive cock, and it's just her petting a rooster,
Right.
and like it's like it's like she's a master troll. I have respect for that.
Right.
Uh, and it's she's doing her thing, whatever to count. So that's
Yeah.
about all I have to say on that. But it's not as serious as you
Well,
think.
thank you for that. Right, right. That's a well, I didn't know I never know how serious to take any of the social media stuff, right? Because back to being real, right? A lot of people think that you know, how you present on social media can be different than you are in real life. And I don't necessarily think that there's anything disingenuine about it. But there's the you when you're presenting, and there's the you when you're just trying to be you, right? And some people will present just as themselves. Me, I try to present as myself, but with a caveat. I try to present as better than myself because there's aspects about me that I just don't think are either interesting or I don't think are maybe as refined as they ought to be. Kind of like what you said about making the game. I want to get this game done so I can make the game that I'm proud of. Well, when I'm presenting and especially when I'm talking with a guest or something like that, or I'm streaming a game, I don't want people to see the me that's kind of a broken mess and working through stuff. I want people to see the me that I want to be, the me that is organized, the me that is collected, the me that is thoughtful, right? And um, I aspire to be that person for real, which is why I do everything I can when I'm presenting to present as that person. Um,
Well, in a sense, you already are that person. It's just that you're sort of putting aside the things that sort of weigh that person down, right?
yes,
So
yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it because I don't but some people would look at that and go, "Oh, that person's not being, genuine." So like when somebody, exaggerates the funny bits or the ironic bits or the crazy bits because that's kind of what they want to
well,
kind of
people don't need
show
to
and
see the stuff
emphasize.
I do with silly putty in private. Trust me, it's a lot more serious than you expect you could do with silly putty.
It's kind of like Weird Al, right? And White and Nerdy, right? Spend my nights with a bowl of a roll of bubble wrap. Hope no one sees me getting freaky, that kind of thing. So Yeah, no, I think that that is important to remember those that when we're seeing people present, we're seeing people present. So like I don't I try not to say, oh, this person's acting like this on camera. That's how they must be in real life. Like I assume that there's a reason that they acted that way on camera. I don't expect that that's how they really are, unless it's something like hidden camera show and they don't realize there's a camera or something like that. I think just about everybody changes in some way as soon as the camera or microphone turns on, and I think most people try to change in a way that protects them from maybe insult or judgment, and you know presents them in what they think to be the safest, best light. And some people feel very safe and very comfortable projecting something totally different than what they are, right? So they'll be crazy and outlandish, and they'll make, they'll do crazy things and say crazy things, but then you meet them in person, you're like, wow, this person's really down to earth. Like Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkins is one of those people where, you talk to him and you're like, this is the same guy that's like doing all this crazy stuff on BBC. He's just a very different person in real life, and so when he acts, he one of his ways that protects himself is he's always acting as characters that are just crazy different from how he is, and he's not doing that to be disingenuous or to be a liar or a fraud. He's just doing that because he wants to show the people the him that he thinks that they want to see, not the him that he really is, which is he thinks kind of boring and quiet and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I definitely understand sort of the need to be the person you think people want you to be.
yeah, and it is a line sometimes between
Right?
being that
And sort
person.
of trying to change yourself,
Yeah,
and it's just difficult to sort of get to the place where you're comfortable enough with yourself that you're willing to just project who you are onto. I think I've gotten pretty close. There's not really a huge leap between who I am here and who I am going to be with my family once I get off of this. There's
yeah,
probably a bigger leap between me and work and me at home, just because uh, I'm scowling and trying to get people to stop complaining at me. So,
gotcha.
all right, I'm not scowling, but I really don't want to be asked for the 14th million time why I'm not doing something that I'm legally not allowed to do. Right? So, it's
Right, right,
so I put up a little bit more of a front there just because I'm just in a different mood. But you know,
right,
I
right.
I'm this very sort of sardonic person that is happy to be serious during serious things, but is always ready to take the piss out of anything.
Nice. Well, it'll be,
At the same time, where it's sort of confusing to people.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, if folks want to see one of the ways that you project yourself, they could check out Esteban's Family Jewels. I didn't mean that to sound as dirty as it probably just sounded. I meant less than they can see your jewels, and I meant more in that you said that there's a piece of yourself in everything that you work on. So hopefully people can sense your humor, they can sense your flair for character and story. Hopefully we can also get a sneak peek at the kind of games that you like, because I imagine you wouldn't make a game in a genre and in a way that you didn't like. So we should be able to get to know you quite a bit, at least indirectly, by playing the game.
yeah, yeah. The choice of platformer was definitely more because my brother loves platformers. I'm not a huge platformer guy, but I grew up with platformers because that's what we had, right? So it's definitely more of an ode to my childhood and to my brother rather than where I'm at with gaming right now. So that's about all I have to say for the choice of genre there. And so thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
That
it's been
great.
super fun.
I know I'm not really I don't really have a lot of pull, but thanks for letting me on anyway.
Hey, you know what? It's not about we all have our own gravity, and it always starts out at 0 and it grows over time. So yours will too, as long as you keep plugging at it, as long as you keep doing the things that you love and you let your passion kind of drive you. I'm confident that you'll just keep building success upon success, or even success upon failure. That's usually useful too. I know I've there's been things I've failed at a dozen times, that people have no clue about because all they saw was the massive success that came after those repeated failures. So it's seldom as easy as it looks. So
Failure number one would be the Minecraft YouTube channel I made when I was 12. That's not a joke. It exists. You could probably find it somewhere, but I'm not going to tell you the name.
Folks, if I find it, I'll put a link in the doodly doo. If you find it, put a link in the comments.
All right, thanks. Bye.
All right. Take care, folks, and tune in next time. I don't know when next time is yet. I'll drop a link on the Twitter. If you're not already following me on Twitter, recently changed the name from Retro Reload to Just Me -V, all one word, because as you can see, it's Just Me -V, only this time also with Andrew from Charred Games. So check out Esteban's Family Jewels, and if you like what you see and you want to invest more in Andrew and his journey, think about paying what you want. So take care.
Thanks.